Hello everyone, Dr. Shabazz here, and today I am going to be covering Chapter 5, which is called the cultural environment. When we talk about global business and all of the factors that you have to analyze before you go abroad, the social cultural factor is one of those that you have to pay keen attention to because it's so dynamic and it's so varied. You have all of these different flavors of cultures, and you have to do what is called an environmental scanning. And environmental scanning also involves not only analyzing the culture, but also the political, legal, economic, financial, technological, human resource, and also competitive environments. There are many different factors that you have to examine prior to going into a global market. But the social cultural is one of my favorites to talk about because the stories are so intriguing and they're so interesting. You've actually had exposure to a couple of different cases, the cheeseless Cheetos in China case, where we saw that there were cultural factors at play when it came with the types of flavors that they wanted to introduce, that PepsiCo wanted to introduce in terms of their Cheetos brand. You also remember the video on India where McDonald's goes into this very populous nation with their menu, realizing that because most of the country practices Hinduism, and the cow is a sacred animal, there would not be any hamburgers or beef on the menu. And so they made several adaptations because of that cultural limitation. There was another case where McDonald's actually went into Israel and allowed the franchisee to change the color code of the signage in Israel to reflect kosher restaurants. So they allowed kosher restaurants to have the golden arches, but also the blue and white signage to distinguish from those with the red background and the golden arches. As a side note, there is a group, a religious group, that started out in Chicago. They're called the Hebrew Israelite Nation. And they had a restaurant there on Adams Street called Soul Vegetarian, which they closed months ago because of the COVID. Caused a lot of small businesses to shut down due to no revenue coming in, to be honest. But anyway, this religious community has a very interesting story. They migrated from Chicago and they went into Africa, and then from Africa they went into Israel, where they struggled for quite some time before finding their footing and getting some conditions there for living in their own land in Dimona. And what they did was they found a niche in terms of menu items, most notably their soy products. So they have this product, these soy products, and which includes their ice cream, which if you had it, you couldn't really tell that it's not made out of dairy. Their mac and cheese, which they're famous for, and also just their products, their, I guess you can say, alternative products to dairy, like their soy cheese and other types of products that can would normally be used as dairy. And they found a market in Israel which allowed for Orthodox Jews, if they wanted to have their cheese on top of whatever they were eating and not violate the Jewish law. So that was a niche. The soy products going into Israel was a perfect niche for that community. So there are lots of examples, and there are a number of examples in our textbook. We're going to go through some of the cultural constructs We'll look at culture and we'll define culture, and then we'll go into some cultural constructs, including the Hofstede's framework, which is something that is talked about quite a bit in academic circles, and many professors research in that area when they're looking at cross-cultural studies. So it says here, culture is a learned behavior, a way of life for one group of people living in a single, related, and independent community. So there's an emphasis on learned, that culture is not genetic, it's not inherited, it's something that you become a part of, it's something that you learn. And we know this because of certain aspects of culture. We talk about music, when we talk about fashion, when we talk about consumer items, we see that many cultures around the world have, some people call it cultural appropriation, but you have certain cultures that adopt aspects of other cultures as their own. So you have this spread of fast food, you have this spread of hip hop, you have this spread of different sports, you have, even when we talk about America, we talk about certain trends becoming popular here from abroad. Like you go to the hookah bars, which are now popular, and of course you have your cuisine, your Indian cuisine, Chinese cuisine, Mexican cuisine, and all of these have become mainstays as part of the American, not necessarily the American culture, but just the American cultural landscape, because you have so many different cultures here in the country that you get a chance to have some exposure to all of these cultural affinities, food, dance, fashion, and other types of traditions that many immigrants may bring with them. So culture is not inherited. It is nearly impossible to change an entire country's culture. I have not studied that in any scholarly realm, but I would imagine that there would be cases where someone can argue that there have been situations where countries have changed over time, and maybe not in totality, but a cultural shift has taken place in many regards. If you talk about technology, that has certainly caused changes in the way people do things just on a daily basis. And so one could make an argument that perhaps there are agents of cultural change. Some of the agents of cultural change due to technology may be the media. If you're talking about television, you're talking about newspapers, magazines, other cultural agents of cultural change may be tourism. You have people coming into your country, bringing their own traditions, bringing certain personal effects that they carry with them, and then the local people see these things and they wonder, well, what is that they're holding? What is that device? What is that type style that they're wearing? What is that they're listening to? What is that they're reading? So all of these become cultural diffusions. So you have tourists that come into a country and influence the local culture. You also have people going abroad and doing the same thing. If you could imagine, you have a student that is from China, goes to America, spends 4 years, gets a bachelor's degree, or India, or Nigeria, or Guatemala. They go back home, they take everything they learn with them academically, but that they also may take back home certain tastes and certain habits and certain things that they have learned while they were a study abroad student. So they go to the foreign country for schooling, and then they come back and they bring that cultural, these cultural habits with them, and then that may make way for certain changes, gradual changes in the culture as demand may increase in certain types of products that are imported from abroad. There is a debate when you talk about standardization versus adaptation, and culture is one of those variables in which that has to be analyzed in order to determine which one that you can accomplish, to be frank. And in most cases, or in many cases, you have situations where, because culture is hard to change throughout the entire country, sometimes you look at a niche. You look at places that have characteristics that are similar to a successful market at home, whether it be an income class, whether it be a particular religion, whether it be a particular culture, that you can look at and say, okay, this is the niche we're going after. Cheeseless Cheetos decided that it was per capita income, and they were going to look for the population that had a reasonable amount of disposable income to target for snack foods. And that's exactly what happened in that case. They made some adjustments, and that product exists to this day in China. Here are some of the elements of culture. This diagram is not in the book. I got this from a previous book, textbook that we used, but it is a very common diagram. And in fact, if I Google this, you'll see variations of of what culture consists of. So if you look at aesthetics, we're talking about the sense of beauty and how beauty is defined, values and attitudes about certain things, whether it be values and attitudes towards lifestyle, values and attitudes towards behavior, life in life choices. And all of these things make a difference in terms of how culture is defined. Manners and customs is a very interesting one, because we do know over a period of time that things have changed in terms of manners. You don't hear ma'am and sir as you did maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, particularly in the South. And there are certain other traditions that I recall as a boy growing up in Chicago and then watching my parents. And one of the things that we could not do, or that we were discouraged from doing, is having our hands in our pockets as we stood in front of an adult. We were told, take your hands out of your pockets and stand up straight, because that was good manners, and that was the best way to present yourself to an adult, is to have your hands to the side, your back straight, and then you're looking forward, so that they had your attention, and that you were giving your reverence to that adult, that elder. And so many of these things have kind of eroded over time. A man standing up as an elderly woman enters the room was also a tradition that I used to see. I saw my father do that once. The idea that a boy, or a girl for that matter, in a neighborhood could not trample across someone's grass. That was a no-no in my neighborhood, because people spent a lot of time working on their lawn and manicuring and getting the hedges right. And for you to go and trample over the grass, or jump over the bushes, or fall in the bushes was just a no-no. You just didn't do it. Social structure. So what is social structure? And there's a slide later on that gives 3 different categories. It gives class, it gives race, and it gives caste. You have different hierarchy in different countries. When we talk about a class system, that may be based on economic class. Maybe it's based on one's status. If you come from a well-known family, maybe that's going to be something that puts you in a privileged position. The idea of race we know very well, because this is a very race-oriented society, and there is a particular pecking order, or there had been a particular pecking order. Now you're having a shift because you have so many immigrants coming in. You have blacks who consist of not only the African Americans, but you have migrants coming from the Caribbean and from Africa who are becoming quite a presence. And with the increase in immigration, you have these concerns of some who are a big word that you can put in your vocabulary, somewhat xenophobic. And that kind of leads me to another element here, education. In this system of education in the United States, we are not often taught about other countries, world history, international affairs, politics, geography, languages. All of these things are lost on most Americans because you grew up speaking the one language. That's the only language you speak. And there's the idea that all of the other countries center around America. They evolve around America. America's in the center, and all the other countries are looking at America. Well, there are some changes that are being made in terms of America's status. I'm not just talking about the last 4 years, but this change has been evolving for the last few decades. When you have some countries that are emerging, the BRICS nations, as well as some of the other smaller nations like South Korea and Singapore that have really made an impact on the global platform. And so this idea that Americans tend not to think globally may give rise to certain social conditions and social exclusions. Like you had this idea about immigration. And President Trump talked about Mexicans being criminals, the Muslim ban, locking all the Muslims out, and then saying things about Africans and also people in the Caribbean, most notably Haitians. There were all of these comments made that kind of show that perhaps there was something lacking in terms of the overall exposure of not only the last administration, but people in general may have these ideas of stereotypes of people that are different from them. So you have this social structure, and it is changing in America because you have a different structure in terms of how race is playing out, even though it's still prevalent. It's still prevalent, but some of the dynamics are changing right before our eyes. Then you have the caste system. The caste system is a system that was imposed on the Indian subcontinent by Europeans, and it was kind of a scenario where you were born into a certain caste, and this caste would determine how you were favored in society. So if you were in the upper caste, that means you were privileged. If you were in a lower class, that means you were shunned and you were not supposed to mix. That's also in the video that you'll see on Tuesday, that they talk about the caste system. And there's a very large underclass in India of what are called untouchables. You have a very large middle class, 300 million, but you also have this very large underclass. And so you have this pecking order, this caste system, which is, by the way, outlawed, but people still have these ideas about the hierarchy of society. And then religion. Again, we saw the McDonald's case both in Israel, also in India, how religion played a role. Personal communication. We talk about verbal and nonverbal. Of course, verbal is the spoken word, not only what you're saying, but how you're saying it, and the phasing, when you say certain things, the timing. If we're talking about business, do you socialize first before conducting business, or do you do business first and then socialize? That is called phasing in when we talk about cross-cultural business. In America, you do business first. You get down to business, you sign the contracts, and you move on. It's time sensitive. Everybody's looking at their watch. They have something to do. They have the next appointment to go to. In other countries, you socialize first, you get to know the person because you want to assess, is this someone I actually like and that I can do business with? I want to take a look. I want to see how they socialize. I want to see if they appreciate my culture. I want to see if they enjoy our cuisine. And so these are some of the things that will happen when you go abroad. You have people wanting to engage with you before they actually sit down to do business. And this is a very important process, that phasing process. And it would do you good if you learn to be a little open to certain adventures. If it's having to go to a cricket match in India or having to eat a certain dish in China, then it's would certainly endear you to the host. If you enjoyed their culture, you enjoyed their food and their hospitality, that is extremely important in a lot of places. And then you have the idea of nonverbal communication, all these different signs and hand gestures, and we have all of these things that we do, and not only in nonverbal, and I have a slide on that which explains it in more detail, but the way you sit, whether you're sitting forward, whether you're sitting back, how you greet, do you shake hands? Do you look somebody in the eye? Do you speak directly? Do you speak indirectly? How do you bow? Do you bow a 45-degree angle? Do you go 90 degrees? Do you just nod your head? Do you kiss cheek to cheek? Do you rub noses? Do you hold hands? What do you do in this culture? There are certain things, certain do's and don'ts when you go abroad, and that information is readily available. There are books. There are all kinds of websites, cultural websites that give you kind of the guidelines of how to conduct yourself in foreign countries. I talked about education, and I believe that serves as the bedrock for a lot of countries, and it gives you your outlook, it gives you your worldview, it gives you your thirst for knowledge. So here's a concept. So on this slide, you have the idea of low and high context cultures. And essentially what this is you have low context cultures which tend to be more explicit in terms of their expression, very outward, very precise, very direct. So the Germans have this reputation of being very formal in their interactions, very precise in terms of business dealings, very time oriented, again, very formal. And then you look at the Americans are also very precise, very direct. Even the tone of language, the things that we are taught, even here in SBI, look somebody straight in the eye, give them a firm handshake, and then give them this greeting. And obviously, in American culture, that is valued, it is sharp, it is impressive. But in other cultures, looking someone in the eye, staring someone in the eye, may be a sign of disrespect. So you have to adjust depending on where you go in terms of the what the culture prescribes for you. I had a friend from Ghana, and he says, "Yeah, we don't stare at our adults in the eyes." I think I might have mentioned that to you, but he says, "Yeah, we don't look our elders in the eyes because that's disrespectful." I didn't ask him why, but he told me. He says, "Yeah, that's disrespectful." And he was from the central part of Ghana, the in Kumasi, and yeah, he gave me that bit of information, and I've heard that in other cultures as well. So if you look, you have the Americans, the British, the French, Italian, Spanish, Mexicans. Now you're getting to the high context cultures where you have a lot of subtlety, a lot of hidden meaning in your communication, in terms of your verbal communication and also your nonverbal communication. Lots of subtlety. Particularly, we talk about verbal culture, language, how you speak, how you write, what words mean. You have situations, and you may have seen this at play when you see people of other countries speaking in their own language, or they may be speaking English, and then they'll say something in their own language, and then they'll say something in English, and then they'll go back and forth. So I witnessed this. I had two friends in graduate school. It was a group of them sitting around. They were Nigerians. We had um, a lot of different students from a lot of different African countries, but these were Nigerians. And I asked him why they did that, why they went back and forth. He says, "Well, I actually said something funny, and I had to say it in my language, otherwise it wouldn't have been funny in English." And so that makes perfect sense. And so you have this idea that there are certain subtleties in the language that can't be translated easily. So sometimes there are situations where you're translating and you have to make sure that you have the right translation, otherwise you're going to there's going to be an embarrassing situation. There have been all kinds of mistranslations because of these errors. So here again, you have high context and low context language. High context means implicit or hidden meanings, and low context means very explicit and direct meanings in terms of how things are communicated. Here are the nonverbal elements of culture I was talking about: ways of talking, pauses, stress on words, intonation, posture, whether you're up straight, whether you're slouching, appearance, how you present yourself. We have a culture, a subculture here, which has become popular in the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years, where people wear their hair certain kinds of ways, they wear their clothes certain types of ways, their jeans are ripped, their hair is, what do they call that? Wash and go hair, or you have kind of the free and easy look with your hair. You've got the tattoos going on. You've got all the piercings, and this is relatively new because growing up, I didn't see a lot of that. The only people who had tattoos were men who were either in the military and who had come out of the military, or people who were at one time incarcerated. And those were the people that had tattoos. You didn't have any, fancy designs, and it was not a fashion statement. It was more of something that you did. You were paying honor to someone special, but yeah, it was kind of a macho thing to have a tattoo. And so now it's become something different in terms of appearance. Head movements, nodding and shaking your head, or moving it side to side. As you see with in India, you'll see them make these head movements, and it kind of means an acknowledgement of the other person, acknowledging what they're saying. And yeah, you have a lot of these different subtleties. Waving. How do you wave? Do you wave like this? Do you wave like this? How do you point? Do you point this way? Do you point this way? Do you point this way? I mean, all of these have different meanings. When I was in South Africa, we had someone with us, and I had been to South Africa several times. But this particular tour guide says, never point like this. He says, when you point, always use all of your fingers and you just point in that direction. You point. There are other types of gestures, like beckoning people. Instead of doing this, you might do this. You know, it seems weird, but there are lots of differences. And if you do one of those gestures in the wrong way in a particular country, it can mean a grave insult, like the thumbs up, which has become universal. People are doing thumbs up everywhere now, but these types of symbols could mean different things in different countries. So you have to be careful about the kind of gestures that you use. Eye movements. What does winking mean? What does batting your eyes mean? These all mean different things in different places. And you have to be careful about winks, because winks in America means that you're flirting, and it means the same thing in other places, but there might be another variation to it that you may not intend. So it's best to be as conservative as possible, and to be a little bit more restrained in your personal expressions until you learn, the customs and the manners and what is expected of visitors. Facial expressions, frowns. I think a smile is one thing that may be universal, because we know, okay, somebody smiles, they're feeling good, they're happy, they are conveying a sense of satisfaction. And frowns can mean different things. Smiles are typically a sign of happiness. Body contact, shaking hands. How do you shake hands? Is it firm? Is it loose? Do you shake hands and touch cheek to cheek? Do you kiss cheek to cheek? Do you rub noses? Do you embrace? There are all these different greetings. Or do you bow? As I said before, how do you bow? Do you just nod your head? Do you go 45 degrees or 90 degrees? How do you greet the other person? And what is the space you give them? Are you up in their face? Do you give them this much space? Or are you out here in terms of your personal interaction? Language of space. When I was talking about the language of culture, that's one of those elements. Language of space, language of time, language of things, language of negotiation, friendship, color, symbols, etc. So here you have sounds, laughing, other types of sounds that people will make. Might be kind of funny in some places, and in other places, again, it may mean something totally different. You have it's interesting because sounds you have sounds in languages, and there's a very interesting language in South Africa called Xhosa. It's actually Xhosa. It's with a click. Xhosa is how you spell it, but it's the X is a click. And there are several different clicks in that language.
What is occurring, everybody? Welcome to Xhosa Kaya. I am so sorry that this lesson took so long, but anyway, it was worth it. I believe I'm going to teach you how to say the clicks. For example, Xhosa, my language that I speak, it is one of the three major clicks that we use. The three clicks are X, which is, or the C, which is pronounced utango, and the Q, which is pronounced D. So I will now try to teach you how to say these supposedly difficult words to say.
Souvent, je me fâche parce que vraiment, ce n'est pas un bruit, ça, c'est ma langue. Par exemple, les gens m'appellent Myriam Makeba. Ça, c'est pas tellement mon nom. Mon nom, c'est Zenzile. Kamakeba, Katwashu, Guvama, Ketile Nengoa, Bantana Balom, c'est Afunoba, Kabulisa, Batengeli, Potilio, Les colonisateurs de chez nous en Afrique du Sud appellent cette chanson click song parce que eux, ils ne savent pas dire où on retourne.
But of course, in English, we don't have any sounds like that. We don't have the clicks. We don't have the guttural sounds like in Arabic. Hebrew has some guttural sounds, some throat sounds. But of course, these sounds are part of the language, but then you have the other types of sounds that we might make when we sneer somebody. They might have disapproval because of something, that they disagree with. And you'll make that sound and it means, you understand what it means in this cultural context. So there are all kinds of different variations, but certainly you need to be careful when you're making nonverbal cues, and we'll see an example in a clip that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. Here's the idea when you translate. This is called back translation. You have an English copy. And in my case, when I was a doctoral student, I had a questionnaire that I need translated in 2 languages, both French and Portuguese, because I was going to survey business owners in West Africa. And so you have these languages that are spoken. So that English questionnaire was converted to French, converted to Portuguese, by one person, and then I got a separate person to convert from French and Portuguese back into English. And then I took both English versions and compared them to make sure that there were no inconsistencies in the translation of what I was trying to convey. So that's called back translation. And this diagram is not in the book. I've added a lot of these to kind of give you a better vision of what it is that I'm referring to. So here's a language of culture, and I believe I shared this with you before. Language of space, time, color, superstition, things, negotiation, friendship, symbols, and agreement. In the video that you see on the right, this is a video you will see later when we get to chapter 11, I believe. It is a video that is titled Managing an Overseas Assignment, and it is a scenario of different American executives. There are several scenarios of American executives going abroad and managing a foreign staff and or doing business with counterparts in other countries and making tremendous mistakes. And this particular segment that I will show you, as you're watching it, I want you to notice the interaction, and I want you also to note on the left-hand side the different languages that are being spoken in terms of space, time, perhaps some of the other things as well. And you'll see how this language of culture fits into these scenarios. So I'll play the first one, and later on in the semester we'll be able to see the entire video. Bear with me.
Yes, this way, please.
Welcome. Ahlan wa sahlan, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. It's good to see you again, Khalid.
Please, please.
You're looking well. How's Mrs. Saud?
شو يقول هذا؟ شو حكي هذا؟
Oh, no, thanks. Really, I'm trying to cut down.
جبنا أبو عيسى خليه يتفضل.
لو واحد يعني يعتذر عندك من أولياء الكوميشن.
أهلا وسهلا، تفضل تفضل تفضل.
Well, here's the problem. We've got this shipment of supplies that came in for the hospital. Now, if we can get them moved to the building site today, we should be able to stay on schedule. As you can see, though, it's getting pretty tight. I just found out today that these supplies have been sitting on the dock for a week. They're just sitting there. They say we don't have the necessary paperwork.
That's a problem.
Yes, well...
دقيقة.
السلام عليكم. الله معك. الله معك.
السلام عليكم.
مع السلامة. الله معك.
I'm sure it's just a simple misunderstanding that can be very easily cleared up.
Mr. Wilson, this is most unfortunate.
I'm in a bit of a crisis here. I mean, we've really got to act fast on this one. Today's Wednesday. Tomorrow and Friday, nobody works here. And then you've got Ramadan coming up, and the way I hear it, things really slow down for a month.
Hello? أبو فيصل؟ دقيقة. أبو فيصل تلفون.
قل له نكلمه حارق.
Basically, I was hoping you could rush a permit through today. I mean, after all, this is a project that's important to your people. It's your hospital.
Mr. Wilson, my people have been living for many years without a hospital. We can wait 2 more weeks. There's no problem.
The Saudi in this scene speaks English rather well and undoubtedly is used to foreigners. However, the real point here is that when you can do things the way that illustrates your appreciation and understanding of the way they think things should be done, you're gaining a great advantage.
For a friend, I might have been able to help. But the American's behavior was very insulting. He first inquires about my wife.
You're looking well. How's Mrs. Saud?
He then refuses the coffee that I give him in hospitality.
Well, I'm sure
He shows me the sole of his foot. And to add insult to injury, he hands me papers with his left hand.
As you can see, things are getting pretty tight.
The man was in a great rush. He had papers written all over. We have a saying that a man who wants to see into the future is either insane or irreligious. What good is a plan if God decrees otherwise?
Okay, so we get an idea of how culture plays a significant role when you talk about the way business is conducted. As you saw in that scenario, you saw the American come in. He was very skittish about accepting hospitality. And of course, if you're in the Middle East, you're going to be drinking a lot of coffee because that is one of the things that they pride themselves on. And the sweets and the dates and all of the things that make hospitality so famous in that part of the world. But some of the other things like the timing, as I made notations of what was going on and how the American kept pushing the contract. And then at the end, the Saudi said he was in a great rush. And he was just pushing this contract, and that certainly is not the way to do business. In any environment, you want to pace yourself, and you want to kind of have kind of an easy flow and put the other party at ease so that there's not the tension and there's not the making of rash decisions, making mistakes, and these things are avoided if you just relax, drink some coffee, have a conversation. And it doesn't have to be politics. It can be just culture. Hey, I went to this museum the other day. It was lovely. Or I had this meal. Or I went to go shopping and I picked up this beautiful carpet. And they would appreciate that. And it just may push business along in a more favorable direction if you show more appreciation of their culture and their standing. And these are some of the things when you talk about language of culture that make it so important. Aesthetics. These are some photographs that I've put together, and I thought they were rather interesting. I like seeing these types of pictures of various cultures, particularly of African descent. And you see the women of Papua New Guinea. And where is Papua New Guinea? Well, that is a place in the Pacific Island. And as you can see, they are using the tattoos. And this is some kind of ceremonial tradition, it seems. They're both wearing the same hair adornments. And they have these tattoos that they're painting on. So apparently it's a very important tradition in that culture. And you look at the woman in the middle with the beads and the close cropped hair and the beautiful shawl, the Native American tradition. And she has very, very sharp features, very, very dark in complexion, very straight hair. And so these are some of the things that we may have heard about our ancestors talking about. And some of our friends will talk about having the ancestry of Cherokee or some other Native American group. And then you have the ancient Egyptians. On the right-hand side, the very beautiful dress and the scarf flowing, and you have the headdress and the sheer shawl, and of course the makeup. Very well done. And this was obviously something that was common then. When I traveled to Egypt, I was able to really appreciate not only the craftsmanship, but just the sheer creativity of the ancient Egyptians in that time. And some of the artwork you can see on the walls, the murals that were painted, that were capturing scenes in history of the different gods in their religion, the worshiping of the sun, and then you would see Horus, and you would see Osiris, you would see Isis, and you would see all of these kings and queens, and they were laid out on these murals, and these murals told a story. And some of these are stories that you would recognize that predate many religions, but the stories sound similar. And you say, I've heard that story before. And it's just a very interesting culture. And when you go to a place like Egypt, you're never the same. I mean, you are never the same. And so this is type of history is something that given February, we should be taking some pride in understanding more of this North African country, which is very important in terms of the genesis of mankind in terms of civilization. So aesthetics, you have the colors, different forms, music, art. As you can see, the Vietnamese woman wearing a very formal dress, very colorful and flowing, and she has I don't know what you call it, the head adornment, but it certainly is very formal. She looks very, very nice in that outfit. And then you have the women on the right, the Maasai tribe of Kenya. I went to Kenya. I've also been to Vietnam, but I went to Kenya and we visited a Maasai village, and we actually had lunch there. When it was one of the most beautiful spreads, most delicious spreads that I've been a part of. And we actually went to a Maasai housing area, and of course they're used to tourists, and so all the women that were in our group, and these were all professors, they were given one of these necklaces, and they were playing music, and they were doing this dance, and so they had all of us participating. And for the men, the Maasais would do these jumps, and I learned that these jumps had to do with the fact that the Maasai warriors would jump because they were looking for approaching enemies, not only other ethnic groups but also animals. So they would do these high jumps. They would have their stick or their staff, or whatever weapon that they were using, and they would jump up to just get a better look at the landscape there. So here you have the Peruvian woman, who is probably I don't know the tradition. Maybe it's Inca, but when I was in Peru a couple of years ago, I saw a lot of women walking the streets with these baby alpacas. This may be either alpaca or a llama. It may be an alpaca, but they would carry these baby alpacas around, and of course you take a picture of them. They'll let you hold the alpaca, and then you give them some pesos, and then they're happy. But this certainly is a very venerable tradition there. You'll see women walking around with these outfits, looking very, very nice. And then on the right, you see the women wearing the neck coils. These are a form of beautification, and you add rings as you age and mature, and it is a tradition that is also seen in parts of Africa. So you have these cultural traditions, and you wonder, well, how is this same tradition in Africa that's also in Burma or Myanmar? That's another story. I mean, this is not a history class, but you had a lot of migrations, you had a lot of cultural exchange, and some of these things found their way in many parts of the world. Different traditions, different art, different, when we talk about adornments, body adornments, we talk about scarification, and show you an example of scarification here in Niger. And then you see the woman on the right with very beautiful velvet skin. Some of the most beautiful, you talk about complexion, it's just it's flawless. And it's interesting because there's a model named Alec Weck from Sudan as well, and she was one of the pioneers that changed the concept of what beauty was for a model, because you typically had the European Eurocentric phenotype that you had to be very slender and you had to have long hair and certain features. And so Alec Weck had very well-defined African features. And so she was a pioneer in kind of breaking that mold in terms of what aesthetics mean as far as beauty. And now you can see here on the next slide all of the different expressions, all of the different colors, and you have all these different views of what beauty, what defines beauty. Education, and as I said, I don't want to get on a soapbox again, but this country does not do a good enough job as far as helping its citizens understand the world. And you look at some of the other countries, and I mentioned my friend from Haiti that I met in Egypt. He was so worldly, he was so well read. He read all these classics, and he obviously spoke French and Creole and English with an accent, but very, very astute, very bright. And certainly you have these certain things that are impressed upon students as they grow up in societies, whether it be the classics or whether it be mathematics or whether it be languages or some other subject that they would be immersed in as a building block for what defines civilization in that society. Going through some of these very quickly, there you have class, race, and caste. I mentioned that earlier. I did have a story. When I was a doctoral student, we went to New York to visit the United Nations, and we were there to go on a lot of visit a lot of the different agencies within the United Nations, and we had a meeting with one such agency, and there was an Indian lady who came in the room, and she was going to lead the talk and tell us about that particular group. And I had a classmate named Shobha, who was also from India, had her sari on, beautiful sari, had her bindi dot in the middle, right between her eyes. And this Indian woman walks in, also sari. I can't remember if she had a bindi in her forehead, but I'm thinking, okay, these two, both from the same country, that's Shobha's homegirl. They're gonna get together. They're going to, they're gonna say, hey, where are you from? That kind of thing, right? That's what you would think. The woman who led the talk just ignored Shobha the whole time, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe she's too far. And then they were right there, and she didn't acknowledge Shobha. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's the cast. Maybe it's she saw something she was wearing, and she knew exactly where Shobha stood. And, it was really shocking that she did not recognize Shobha. And, they were, their saris, the wraps that they wear were slightly different. So it might have had something to do with that. That's my only guess, because it just seemed to be very rude. So as I begin to wind down, I did want to talk about the Hofstede's framework. This is very important. This, in the book, they only give you 5 elements. There are actually 6. So, and I'm not sure, this book is a 2nd edition, came out, is copyrighted in 2017. But the 6th dimension of the Hofstede's framework was added in 2010, so they should have caught it in this book. They did not catch it, which is not a good thing. But be that as it may, I am letting you know that there are 6 elements, and that is restraint versus indulgence. So this is a framework where Gerhard Hofstede has made a career off of lecturing about this. And many researchers have done articles and papers on using the Hofstede's framework, and they reference it. And in fact, I believe I referenced it also in my own doctoral studies, because this is a baseline. When you talk about cross-cultural comparisons, it's one of those that you use. And so here you have the different categories: power distance, hierarchy versus being equal or egalitarian, individual versus collectivist or being group oriented, uncertainty avoidance. Are you uncomfortable with uncertainty? Do you want to be more organized and more have more procedures, or are you willing to take risk? Are you comfortable with uncertainty? Masculinity versus femininity. They defined it power versus nurturing. And short-term versus long-term, futuristic thinking versus short-term thinking. I want it now, which is the type of society we happen to live in, kind of a short-term mindset. And then finally, indulgence, restraint versus indulgence. In being able to indulge and enjoy yourself versus restraining yourself and being modest. And you know, it's interesting because I'd like to show you a few things. One of the things that I'd like to show you is this website where Gerhard Hofstede is. This is Gerhard Hofstede's website where you can actually use this to do a kind of a quick look at how countries are classified. And we can put in a few countries here. And this is the United States. Power distance, individualism, very high, 91. Masculinity, pretty high. Uncertainty, avoidance. People in terms of being comfortable or uncomfortable with uncertainty, yeah, it's 46. And so that's around the middle. Look at long-term orientation, very low. That we're more short-term oriented. Indulgence, relatively high. Let's put some other countries in here. Let's go with Bangladesh, and we can see there are differences. Power distance, which means in Bangladesh, they're more comfortable with the idea that there's a hierarchy. So they're at 80. They look for hierarchy where we're more individualist and we can question authority. And so there you have it. Individualism, Bangladesh is very low. They're more group oriented. Masculinity, about half, a little bit more masculine than feminine. Uncertainty, avoidance. How comfortable are you with being uncertain about the future? You know, they're very uncomfortable. they're very uncomfortable with uncertainty. So there's probably a lot more methodical planning, a lot more long-term orientation, and a lot less indulgence. Let's put in a couple more. And we can look at which one. Something very different. Let's go United Arab Emirates. Now in the purple. Look at power distance. It's got to be a hierarchy. Not very individualistic. Masculinity, femininity, that's half and half. Uncertainty avoidance. How uncomfortable are you with uncertainty? Well, in the United Arab Emirates, they rank a high because they're very uncomfortable with uncertainty. And they don't have any data on long-term orientation or indulgence. But certainly, if you go to United Arab Emirates, they have a lot of things you can buy for sure. And people spend a lot of money going on vacation there. Where else can we go? Let's go to Ghana and see what they say about Ghana. Ghana is now in the purple. You have a lot of similarities here. Look at indulgence. Indulgence is rather high. People like to eat. I can attest to this. I've been to Ghana 4 times. They like to eat. They like to enjoy life. They like the music. Ghanaian they have very good taste, exquisite taste in music. Long-term orientation, not so much. Not so much. And so you have some similarities in with countries in some of these categories. And you can continue and add countries and do these comparisons. And so I think it's a very interesting tool to use. Framework here, or this construct. And I noticed that when I look at this, I didn't see much in the way of analyzing Africa. I see South Africa here under Anglo, which is ironic because South Africa is predominantly African, Black African. And so I think they're thinking about the apartheid in the Dutch British tradition, but South Africa is certainly not Anglo. And you have Egypt and Morocco, which are African countries. Egypt is North Africa, Morocco is North Africa. Turkey, Kuwait, and Qatar are in the Middle East. And so you have all of these different groupings that, and they're assessed using some similar elements and power distance and gender egalitarianism and all the others, uncertainty avoidance. So it seems like it's kind of an extension to the Hofstede's framework. Some other concepts when you talk about these cultural, I guess you can say, cultural affinities. Certain cultures are known for certain things. I don't believe I have to go into any more detail about that. Where can you find information? There's a lot of data that is out there, so you shouldn't have problems finding things on countries around the world and assessing their potential in terms of how business is done abroad. Here's some do's and don'ts when we talk about the etiquette in Japan and this idea of how do you greet, slight bow. It is not advisable to give a deep bow because that is reserved for people who are not only elderly but people who are at high status. And so a slight bow will suffice. Handshake is acceptable. Business card etiquette, accepting somebody's card with both hands or this way, take it, look at it, study it, turn it over, look at it some more before you put it away. Here in America, we get somebody's card, we put it in our pocket, we put it in our portfolio or whatever we're carrying, and that would be considered rude to just get somebody's card and just put it in your pocket, because that means, okay, it's not important, that you put it away right away. And so in Japan, there's a whole etiquette towards exchanging business cards. And I want to get to one in particular, but this is in Korea. Elders are respected for their wisdom and knowledge, nobility, honor, parental respect and authority figures. It's all there. There's China. Foreigners who want to conduct business in China may need to seek out lower-level persons and obtain their favor in order to gain access to more powerful superiors who are decision makers. That is also true here to a degree. And then this is the one that I wanted to point you to because we saw that in the segment, the video segment. The American executive showed the sole of his shoe and passed papers with his left hand and was rushing, and of course the other party at the end talked about the mistakes that were made. And so these things are very important, and particularly when you talk about hospitality, that's something that Arab countries take extremely important, take very seriously. And also in Africa, it's a very serious thing for somebody to lay out food for you. They may have spent a month's salary laying this thing out for you, and you better enjoy it, because then that shows that you appreciate what they have provided. So it says here that the time of Latin Americans are more flexible about time than are North Americans. Well, that may be true. You have the siestas there, and people take time to enjoy life. There is a saying that one works to live. One does not live to work, which means that you work so that you can live a comfortable life, you can enjoy life, as opposed to living your life only to work. And so they take that to heart, and that's what you will see in Latin American cultures, and they tend to want to enjoy life. These are some of the things that jargon that you do not want to use. I was about to say often, but you probably don't want to use it at all in business dealings, because they would just look at you like they're already have English as a second language, and then you're throwing up all these colloquialisms and terms, going belly up, 100K, shotgun approach. Another one we use that's not on this list, give me a ballpark figure. And someone says, what do you mean ballpark figure? I don't know what that means. So these are things we say, and they just roll off our tongue, but other English speakers, it might be their second language, they're thinking, okay, what are you talking about? And so you want to make sure that, again, some of these business dealings, you want to be conservative, and you want to make sure that you can be understood. And so the language that you use is very clear and plain. So that's all I'm going to say today. That was very long. We're at a class period, 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I actually recorded 1.5 hours, but I've edited it down to 1 hour and 15 minutes to make up for the class that we missed. On Tuesday, you will have another video that you will watch. This gives a foundation of what culture is. In this video, you'll see the importance of globalization and its impact on culture. And so we saw the relationship between globalization and economics, but in that video, you will see economics and culture, and you will see how culture changed society in terms of style, consumption habits, beliefs, education, all the things you saw in that earlier diagram. And I think that you'll gain something out of it. So that's all I'm going to say today. Hopefully you got through the video and you took advantage of all those breaks. And we're going to be done with culture after Tuesday. You watch the video and you take the 10-item quiz that will be at the end. So the video is about 45 minutes, and so you'll have another 30 minutes to take notes or do whatever you want to do, and then you can take the quiz in the last 15 minutes of class. So have a good weekend, be safe, and I'll see you next week. Take care.